General Petraeus here, we talked about an infrastructure surge, and we also announced the formation of the National Infrastructure Performance Council, headed by General Petraeus and also by Hank Greenberg, who's in China, because he's 94 years old. He needed another trip, and but he sends you his best, and thank you very much for coming. Lawrence Kudlow serves as Assistant to the President for Economic Policy and Director of the National Economic Council. He leads the coordination of President Donald J. Trump's domestic and global economic policy agenda. Prior to the White House, Mr. Kudlow was a CNBC senior contributor and host of CNBC's primetime show, The Kudlow Report. He also served as chief economist and senior managing director of Bear Stearns & Company. Let me introduce to you Larry Kudlow, and please give him a warm hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Thanks for having me. My very best to Hank Greenberg, who is an old friend and a very distinguished American. So, infrastructure, right? That we're talking about today? Good. I just want to make sure I got the right notes here. It's a very tricky job that I have. And I get to speak about another subject about which I know virtually nothing, but I'm doing the best I can. I do want to begin with some thoughts on the economy and maybe a little bit on trade, and we'll get to the infrastructure piece. I'll tell you what I can tell you, which not necessarily everything there is, but I just want to note all the talk about a recession that I heard in recent months, I think was highly flawed, very wrong. I'm not going to attribute motive to it. I'll just say that there's virtually no evidence of a recession in sight. I sure don't see one over the horizon. Forecasts are forecasts, but I never understood it, and I want to raise a couple of points about the depth of our economy and the success of the economy. You know, President Trump from day one has essentially launched a program that would rebuild and reinvigorate and re-incentivize economic growth, which had been lagging for a long time. I don't really believe this is a partisan issue. The growth performance of the past 20 years until recently under Republicans and Democrats has been way subpar. Our program, as you may know, is a very simple, straightforward one, promoting supply-side and market-oriented reforms. We lowered marginal tax rates on individuals and businesses. We've embarked on across-the-board deregulation, some of which will impact, of course, the permitting and so forth of various infrastructure. So lower tax rates and deregulation. We've opened up the energy sector, which itself has benefited from the tax reforms and the deregulation, and more to come. America now is the dominant energy power in the world, and I think that not only has had a tremendous boost to the U.S. economy, it's helping the world economy, and it's helping change a lot of the strategic interests of the U.S. in both Europe and in Asia. And we also have embarked on a tough course to reduce trade barriers wherever they exist. The President is defending the American worker, auto worker, manufacturing worker, technology worker, farmer, rancher, and so forth and so on. And our view is that by and large, it's succeeding. And we have headwinds. We've had excessively tight money. Some of that now is beginning to shift as monetary policy turns to a more accommodative stance. I'm glad of it. But I think the excessive tightening in 2017, 2018 created an obstacle to economic growth. We have a very weak European economic story, virtually a recession in Europe, which has been very difficult, particularly for our manufacturing exports. Also in Asia, not our friends in Australia, thankfully, they've been doing terrific, but much of Asia has been very sluggish, including China. Chinese numbers came out. We saw some new numbers this morning. Again, a lot of softness. Many economists believe this 6% Chinese GDP is overstated by several percentage points. I don't want to go down that road. It is what it is, and hopefully we can help them. Hopefully both sides can help each other with a trade deal that I will talk about in a few moments. But I want to emphasize and maybe answer some of our critics, if you will, about the results of our economic growth plan, and that is that we are experiencing what I would call a middle-class boom, a middle-income, middle-class boom, where, as been pointed out by several writers and recent Census Bureau numbers, the average take-home pay in real terms adjusted for inflation is $66,000. That's the middle of the middle, $66,000. It's increased by $5,000 in 2.5 years. That's a 7 or 8% gain. The prior administrations were barely able to eke out a 1% gain in middle income. And furthermore, on the tax cut side, average family of 4 married filing jointly experienced a $2,500 or $3,000 tax cut. So if I adjust, the first number on the median income is, of course, pre-tax. The second number is, of course, after tax. But the reality is we're probably something in the neighborhood of a $6,000 or $7,000 increase for middle-income people. And that's a huge number. That's just in 2.5 years, $6,000 or $7,000 in just a couple of years. And we're proud of that. And that is my answer to some of our critics who say that only the well-to-do have benefited from either the tax cuts or the deregulation or the energy. It's simply not the case. And that's a very proud achievement on our part. The unemployment rate is 3.5%. It's a 51-year low. The inflation rate is, 1 to 1.5% at most. Share prices have done very well. Since the election back in 2016, on average, the indexes are up about 50%. A lot of Americans own stocks, not just well-to-do people, but through IRAs and 401ks and pension funds. About a 50% increase when you look at the major indexes. Household net worth, whatever you own, less your liabilities, there's now $103 trillion, $103 trillion of household net worth. That's an increase of about $12 trillion since the president took office, roughly a 13% gain. Those are big numbers also. Real disposable income is up 3%. Non-supervisory, let's see if I get this right. Non-supervisory production wages are up about 3.5% to 4%. I'm interested in the latest analysis from Moody's. My longtime friend, Mark Zandi, who was not a Trump supporter, nonetheless, Moody's put out an election analysis of the economy. And if these trends continue, more or less, the president could win in a landslide next year, 351 electoral votes. Not my forecast, it's Moody's, Mark Zandi's forecast. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that very much. I don't think we've ever agreed on anything before, but he's a very smart guy, as I say, he's a personal friend. But that's what he's saying, his so-called pocketbook model of the economy, which I think some of this stuff's come off the old Ray Fair, Yale University analysis. The economy matters to elections, and the pocketbook model gives POTUS a 351 electoral college majority. I'm not here to forecast elections. I don't know anything about elections. I don't know anything about politics. But I did read the Moody's analysis and just thought I'd pass it along to you. I will say this, though, in terms of the economy, while not everything is perfect, and as I say, we have had headwinds, nonetheless, we have created over 6 million new jobs and about 500,000 or so increase in manufacturing jobs. And I want to make a note on that. I like talking about this stuff. I used to do it for a living. I don't get a chance to do it enough, so bear with me. But even the jobs numbers continue to come in strong. With revisions in September, we created 181,000 jobs. That's pretty darn good. There's 7.1 million job openings and only 5.8 million unemployed. That's a very rare thing. So the job openings are way above those who are still unemployed. That has been the case for 18 months. We've never seen anything quite like it. And the increase in the labor force continues. We call it coming out of the woodwork. I think in large measure, people, number one, see the jobs are available. Number two, the wages and compensation have, again, this is just for ordinary, average Americans. The wage numbers are very good. The disposable income numbers are very good. The tax cuts have helped enormously, so they want to go to work. And we will see more of that. And my dear friend and colleague, Ivanka Trump, has spent a good deal of time working with corporations around the country to train and retrain what she calls reskilling people to be able to fit those jobs. And I think that's a very positive development. One other point, the other survey is called the household surveys. We always look at the payroll survey for established corporations. There's a second survey from which the unemployment rate derives and is equally, if not more important. It's called the household survey, and it is spewing out phenomenal numbers. In the past 4 months, I think the average has been 378,000 per month. So the non-farm payrolls, that's always the headline number, last month ran about 180,000. The household number, which is when you look under the hood, is averaging 378,000, right, about twice as much. And that tells me that the payroll number is going to rise. Households tend to be a leading indicator. I think that's going to be a tremendous boost to the animal spirits and the overall economy. It's a great leading indicator. So these are big pluses. I know existing home sales were a little soft this month, but they're still growing at a solid 4 to 5% rate, I think, year on year. In fact, the whole housing sector looks better. That would be in large measure a function of lower interest rates, particularly financing rates, obviously mortgage rates, as well as the Fed funds rate. So housing tends to be a leading indicator for the entire economy. And I'm looking at a leading indicator in the labor market, i.e. the household survey. And the first-time unemployment insurance claims are absolutely rock bottom. That's another important leading indicator of the economy. So I think things are pretty good, actually. And we have hit a soft spot in the last couple quarters. And my own hunch is in the next several quarters ahead, we will see the economy pick up steam. That's what the numbers look like to me. Lord knows I could be wrong, but that's what our numbers look like. It's my great hope that sometime in my lifetime, our friends and allies in Europe will embark on supply-side policies and lower tax rates and deregulate. That's a hope. It's a prayer. It's deep meditation. But if they did, they would grow their economies. You know, a couple years ago, our economies were growing about the same rate. And in the last several years, we've pulled ahead by a margin of almost 2 to 1. And we go to these conferences, G7, G20, UN, and so forth, and I've gotten to know the leaders very well, and I admire them, and their finance ministers are coming in, and I just say the same thing. You need incentives to grow. There's no reason why you all can't grow at the same pace. If we're growing at, let's say, 2.5% to 3%, and I think we're going to get back above 3% in the next 12 months, you know, you're at 0 to 1%. You can fix this not by negative interest rates, but by providing incentives so it pays after tax to work, save and invest, take risks, and also better to choose work than non-work, and better to deregulate your markets, whether they're labor markets or energy markets or any other markets. It's a constant message on my part. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. I wish him luck. I wish my friend, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, luck. I've known him for a while. He's a very smart guy. I personally favor Brexit. He's had a tough time of it, but he's got a strong backbone. I was just reading in the Bloomberg headlines he's going to get another go at it in Parliament. I hope he gets it. And I think if Britain stays on track and they keep their tax rates low, they can be a tremendous, very hospitable investment location, which will help them in their move towards freedom from the European Union. I call it all Magna Carta 2.0. We'd love to do a free trade deal with Britain if they can untangle themselves. So we'll see. I guess politics in Britain are just about as screwed up as they are here. Something like that. I didn't really say that. That was off the record. It was a joke. Thank you for laughing. Appreciate it very much. But I do wish him luck. And finally, let me make a few points on trade, and then I want to turn to the infrastructure piece. So let me first not go to China, but the USMCA, which is a very important trade deal for us. In many respects, it's more important, at least short run, than China, because our total trade with our neighbors in Canada and Mexico, our total trade is just about twice what our total trade is with China. And the estimates of USMCA from various organizations run about 0.5% of extra GDP, 0.5% of additional GDP, maybe a couple of 100,000 jobs, maybe another $100 billion in direct investment into North America. It would really have a palpable, strong, significant impact on all our countries, Canada and Mexico and the U.S. This is a deal that has, it's really a bipartisan deal. It always was. It's been engineered by the smartest trade lawyer in the country, one Robert Lighthizer, like me, an old Reagan Cub Scout. Nobody that knows this stuff better. And we have old economy principles on domestic content and wages. We have breakthroughs in agriculture for American farmers, particularly dairy farmers. We have labor protections for Mexico that probably have moved their own parliament in ways that wouldn't happen without USMCA. On the new economy side, we have very important protections for intellectual property and related matters. That's never happened before by itself. That's going to generate a lot of entrepreneurial investment. We have openings for financial services and digital services and a currency stability pact. It really is a solid deal, pro-growth deal. And if you can, I invite your help in any way possible to get that through. I know politics are rough right now, but let me say this. I know that President Trump has his political differences with Speaker Pelosi. I understand that. But I will also say that Speaker Pelosi on USMCA has been cooperative and accommodative and accessible. And we continue to meet, Ambassador Lighthizer continues to meet with leading senior Democrats, where there is considerable positive momentum for passage of USMCA. So I think it could well pass, and it could well pass this autumn. And that's what a lot of leading House and Senate members are telling me. So I wouldn't, the U.S. system, we can do many things. We can agree on some things and disagree on others. Again, my hat's off to the Speaker, who has been helpful in this process for USMCA. We'll see what happens, but I'm optimistic about that. I would also note with pride that we negotiated some early agreements with Japan to open up on agriculture and industrial commodities and e-commerce, digital services and so forth. I think that's a huge plus. U.S.-Japanese relations have never been better. It's very important in both strategic terms as well as economic and trade terms, so we're very proud of that. We're even able to sell some additional beef to Europe. That's a good thing. And, of course, that leaves us to China. And just a couple of words. I don't have any new news, I don't think, on China. All I'll say is that what the President's calling Phase 1 is moving ahead very nicely. And I think, a week or two before the meetings, I said, don't rule out the possibility that something good could come out of the talks between the principals 2 weekends ago. And I think Phase 1, which, as you know, includes, first of all, agriculture, not just agriculture purchases, but also more agriculture access to a number of products and services that heretofore have been closed. China has made some important concessions on that, and we welcome those concessions. In addition to that, we're working through intellectual property, so-called IP theft, and we're gaining on that. We've made great progress on financial services. We've made great progress on currency stability. And what may not get done in Phase 1 may spill over into a Phase 2. And this is, to some extent, a new approach. We are both sides recognizing that it may not be necessary to do everything all at once. So we will try to segment these issues going forward. And what's not done in Phase 1, as I say, can spill over to a Phase 2 and conceivably a Phase 3. It's, of course, the President's call. We pulled back a bit on some of our tariffs. It'll be up to him to see if we pull back on additional tariffs before year end. But if the deal works well, there will be opportunities for that. Again, I'm not predicting. I'm just saying that the President himself has publicly said that might be possible. And I think the deal would benefit both sides. I think it would help both countries in their economic growth and help to stabilize relations and hopefully provide some relief to financial markets and to our economies. I see the statements coming out of Beijing have been very positive. We've been through this before. Sometimes we think we've had progress or even a deal or close to a deal or 90% of a deal, and then we get slammed by the Ministry of Commerce, or we get slammed by the Foreign Ministry, or we get slammed by whoever. That's not happened this time. The immediate aftermath of our Phase 1 agreement has been very positive, coming from the Commerce Ministry and the Foreign Affairs Ministry, and Vice Premier Li himself has made some promising comments. So we'll see. I'm kind of playing this from the optimistic side. I rather like the mood music, and we will continue, to go on. I guess our team probably go over there. Maybe their team come back here. I don't want to get ahead of the schedules, but we are doing what it takes to make a deal, which is a difficult thing. I would just say, as an aside, probably, certainly in all economic and trade history, there has never been the scope of negotiations of this type, ever. And if you include other issues such as human rights and national security, then I would say without question, we have never witnessed such a wide, broad, deep scope between two rival countries. And I think President Trump, I want to say a word here. I am a free trader, as I think you know. President Trump's vision on trade has always been one of zero tariffs and zero non-tariff barriers and zero subsidies from governments. But unfortunately, we don't live in that world. And the trick is always getting from here to there. And I myself have written some op-ed pieces on this with his permission. And negotiations are very important. He's a very tough negotiator. And part of the arrows in his quiver include tariffs. And he has used them, as you know, to enforce and punctuate our point of view. And I myself believe that is necessary in trade negotiations as tough and difficult as this. And again, just to wrap up on this, the president has to defend America. He has to defend the American economy. He has to defend the American workforce. He has to defend American technological innovation. And he is unhesitating in his view that he will do so. He will defend our interests as he must, as he must. And I think he's made that perfectly clear. And I think it could generate very positive results, but rest assured he will continue on that track. Protecting the United States is number one. We do business with the rest of the world as long as it's fair and reciprocal, and we all play by the same rules of the game. And in cases where other countries who are our partners or our competitors refuse to play by the rules of the game, President Trump has said time and again, and will continue to say, that he will defend American interests. He is a tough negotiator. Personally, I like tough. Now, infrastructure. Speaking of getting from here to there. Didn't you think that was cute? Remotely cute? Something like that? A couple of things, and maybe I'll take some questions to try to redeem myself after I walk through some of this stuff. Now, we've done a lot of work on infrastructure. A lot of this runs through the National Economic Committee that I direct, and we've got some awfully smart people, and our whole team on infrastructure has worked very hard. You know, we've created several executive orders. One federal decision policy, which probably just to sum up, reduces permitting time. That's one of our biggest things. Bring the permitting time down for whatever the project is, whether it's a highway or a pipeline or whatever it is. We've also run through executive orders to limit state authority where there's constant obstacles. And we want to move through interstate infrastructure projects as well. Too many times, the localities stand in the way. I'm a great believer in federalism, but I'm also a great believer in interstate commerce and economic growth. And so our executive orders have tried to deal with that. We've changed the Endangered Species, we've changed the Clean Water Act, and a number of issues in the environmental area where we strongly believe in environmental standards and environmental safety, but we also believe that prior administrations have gone too far. And I might add, when you take a look at the emissions numbers for the United States, carbon emissions have come down steadily for years. And we're very proud of that because many countries in other parts of the world love to talk about environment, and yet when you look at their record, emissions have gotten worse, not better. So much of this comes from the revolution in natural gas, in LNG. And so we have issued executive orders that will make it easier to develop not only the drilling and the fracking and so forth, but also the pipelines and the terminals. And we're running, I guess, about 12.5 million barrels a day regarding oil. We have record volumes of natural gas. You can go into the Permian Basin today, and they'll basically give it to you. They'll pay you to take it, right? The numbers, the prices and trading at zero, in some cases trading below zero. So, I don't know, Europe has negative interest rates. We have negative nat gas prices. I'd rather have negative nat gas prices, to tell you the truth. Some states don't want to play. I wouldn't want to name any names. They're sort of to the northeast of us, where we are today, where I once lived or have lived from time to time. They don't hardly have any nat gas. And whatever fuel prices, they have to pay much higher because they import it from Europe or distant lands, including Russia, not our best friend. We've tried to change all that, and we've had considerable success, and that has a lot to do with our own infrastructure policies. On what I would call the bread and butter infrastructure, we have not made yet a clear endorsement, but the president has tweeted positively on the Senate highway bill, America's Transportation Infrastructure Act. He has tweeted positively. I don't want ahead of him suggest that we will absolutely endorse it, but again, he likes what he sees. And we have signed America's Water Infrastructure Act back in 2018, and we also signed the FAA Reauthorization Act. So the Senate bill is basically a reauthorization bill, and I'm not an expert in every provision, but again, we like what we see. We think that, and the costs seem rather manageable, and so we will go down that more traditional route, and we will continue our efforts to deregulate and improve permitting wherever possible, wherever possible. Some of my friends here are working a project down in Texas that I first heard about at the UN a couple of years ago from the Japanese Prime Minister, who's a brilliant man. It's a wonderful thing to sit in a UN bilateral meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister and hear about bullet trains from Houston to Dallas. You know, live and learn is part of my job. It's the reason I love it. And folks, we will give you the permits. If you can figure out how to pay for it, go on ahead and do it. Go ahead. Go on ahead and do it. But you know, if you have to stop at every town between Houston and Dallas, it won't really be a high-speed bullet train anymore. But you know that, right? You won't have to do that anymore. And I'm just defending my friend, House Member Kevin Brady. But I guess you've cleared all those hurdles. And wherever, it's okay. Just hate to say this, but don't expect too much federal financial assistance. I'd like to say if we had it, we'd give it to you. We don't have it, but I wouldn't give it to you anyway. But you can raise the money privately. It's very important stuff. And so I'm all in favor of that. So again, I think we like the Senate version of the highway bill, and we will continue to deregulate. And permitting is just so important. The more I learn about this, the more I begin to understand what the obstacles and blockages are. And America can't afford it, and we need to streamline our system as much as possible. That too will grow the economy. Look, it's not exactly breaking news. I'm an old Reagan supply-sider. I believe in economic growth. I believe in prosperity. I think when jobs are plentiful and the economy is rising and the stock market is helping our pension funds, and there's enough job training to help folks even as old as I am to adjust to new careers, this is a good thing. Makes Americans happy. I love happy Americans. I love happy people everywhere. I'm a prosperity guy, and I actually believe we're gaining on it. That's what I think. We're gaining on it. Let me stop there. Take your questions. Thank you. Not too hard on me.
Thank you. Does the MCA, I know the MCA promotes increased trade between the US and Mexico and Canada. Does the MCA have any policies, plans, or guidance for investment in infrastructure to support this increase in trade?
Sorry, I literally just couldn't, it wasn't clear.
Sorry, I'll start again.
Where are you? Oh, there you are, okay. Try me again.
Does the MCA have any, oh, Maria Giesemann, the Instant Group. Does the MCA have any policies, plans, or guidance for investment in infrastructure to support the increase in trade?
I don't think there's any, I could be wrong here because I don't know every detail, but I know a bit about it. I don't know if there's a specific infrastructure provision. There might be. I hate to close the door on that, but I'm just trying to think through the domestic content and the domestic wage rules and some other rules. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think not, but I could be wrong. So please don't use that as the end-all, be-all. Couple other questions. I got, Lord knows, 20 more meetings back at home.
Because NAFTA didn't have that, so I was hoping the MCA would correct the NAFTA problem that didn't have any support in infrastructure.
The which problem?
NAFTA.
NASA?
NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement.
You know, I have to find out, okay? I don't want to speak. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Question.
Just
Yes,
a quick question here. When it comes to offshore wind, I know that New Jersey has given out a lot of, probably over a gigabyte, a gigawatt worth of power to a couple of overseas.
This is for what, offshore?
Offshore wind, yeah.
Wind?
Yeah, okay. Offshore wind off the New Jersey coast. And I understand that the next step in the process is the federal permitting piece for the environmental piece of that. Any insight into, because you're talking about permitting and how we're just trying to knock that out?
New Jersey offshore wind?
Correct.
That is the most obscure question I've ever had.
Happy to
I
supply.
mean, this is a very tough crowd, you know?
It's a big deal out there.
I'll have to get back to you on
Fair enough.
just limited to New Jersey.
Well, it's really up and down the coast, but New
'Cause
Jersey
wind-
particularly
wind
is what I'm talking
moves,
about.
It's subject to, interterrestrial. Wow. This is a humbling experience. I will take. You could broaden it out a little. I'd have no problem with that. Yes, I'm afraid I can't. The lights are worse than they are in here. Yeah.
Many of us that are here in Washington, we look at the president's executive orders and we say, geez, that's really, really great. That's really going to help with the permitting problems. And then when we go to speak to the agencies to which the orders are addressed, the agencies say, I don't know about that order. What do I do? And General Petraeus the other day suggested, well, maybe there's a need for an infrastructure person in the White House to make sure that the agencies do know about those executive orders and pay attention to them. Is there any thinking about how we put some teeth in the really, really good orders that the president is putting out?
Well, the only thing I'll say is those executive orders have a lot of teeth, and we're actually issuing additional guidelines, by the way, which will probably wind up getting in the direction that you want us to go from the gist of your, in other words, there's rules and there's rules. And I don't want to get too technical on this, I'll get in over my head, but we want to make sure that executive orders and various other rulemakings are carried out. All right, that's a policy issue and it becomes a legal issue inside the executive branch, and we're on it. We're very much on it. In fact, in recent days you may have read a discussion about exactly that with regard to so-called regulatory guidelines. So yeah, we're on that as best we can. Look, some of this stuff, the bigger question, there will be legal challenges, there always are. We live in a litigious society, I get that. And we are saying, in many cases for these executive orders, that the federal government has an override with regard to the states and localities. That's tricky business. You know, we believe in the 10th Amendment, but in some cases it's just so patently clear that some of the localities are just blocking progress. And this whole discussion of infrastructure is a perfect example of that, just a perfect example of that. So we've done what we can within the bounds of the law, and we probably will be challenged, and we'll fight those challenges, whether it's environmental or whether it's energy related or whatever. But that's the best we can do. Any one last quick one? I can see you guys are thrilled about the economy and China,
Mr. Kudlow, thank
the
you for
World
coming.
Series, and
You're obviously
I
busy.
tell you, sir, I'm going to go on the car ride back, and I'm going to Google up New Jersey wind. New Jersey wind. Wonderful stuff. Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
And here I thought you were a busy man. Thank you very much for coming. Was there an agreement in principle between the President and Senator Schumer and Speaker Pelosi on infrastructure? And if there wasn't an agreement, what sort of were the major sticking points between them?
Well, there was never a hard and fast. I was in those meetings. There was never a hard and fast agreement. We had the beginning of a process, and it was a promising beginning, but unfortunately the process broke down. And there were multiple issues involved in the process. That doesn't mean it couldn't ever be resurrected in that conversation, but it just wasn't to be. So we will.
If I may, did it break down for reasons unrelated to infrastructure itself, or were there substantive issues regarding what the contours of the bill should be?
Well, no, there are always issues. When you say the contours of a bill, there are always issues about what's in the bill, what the various provisions are, and there are always issues about financing what's in there. That's about as far as I want to go on that. Look, I have nothing but respect for the legislative process, nothing but respect for, the powers of Congress. I'm just saying the conversation was started. I was there personally, for whatever that's worth, and then it was discontinued for a variety of reasons. It doesn't mean it couldn't be restarted. But you have, as I say, you have authorizing committees looking at the highway bill now, and I think that's very important. We have certain exigencies, requirements, and responsibilities, roads, tunnels, highways, and so forth. That we got to help America. We must help America do that, and then we want to expand that wherever possible. So that's what the goal is. And as I said, I don't want to go any further than the president's tweet, but it was a positive tweet about the Senate bill. So I want to thank you, those of you from New Jersey and not New Jersey. I want to thank you, and gosh, I hope I never have to do this again. Just kidding. Just kidding.